not to forget to record, so I'm pushing the record button before I forget. So, the idea for today, whoever was trying to talk, that was well said. I don't think I could do that if I tried. So the idea of today is
Mike trying.
The idea of today is us kind of walking through the different versions of how you can make an offer, right? Most of us know that there are a bunch of different documents that one can use. Oftentimes it's dependent upon where you practice, right? For example, Fairfield County doesn't utilize the 4-page standard contract in the MLS often. That doesn't mean we don't use it at all, but we don't use it often. And so for those of you who don't know, the entire rest of the state, that's all they use. Right? Purchase agreement, offer to purchase. If you buy something in Hartford or in New Haven or in stores or in Waterbury, they look at you like you have, another person growing out of your neck, because they just use contracts. Right? We like to make it difficult in Fairfield County, and so we have our own version of how to do things, and it's kind of dependent upon where you do business. For example, for those of you who are anchored out of the Stamford Market Center and do most of your business down along the coastal towns, you're used to a 2-page purchase agreement. And I'll show you all these documents shortly. You're used to a 2-page purchase agreement. For those of you who are anchored out of the Ridgefield Market Center, you're used to a 1-page offer to purchase, because for the most part, Northern Fairfield County uses a 1-page non-binding, quote unquote, offer to purchase form, while Southern Fairfield County typically uses the 2-page purchase agreement. The main difference between the two documents is that the purchase agreement has some teeth in it that says once everybody signs it, it should be considered a contract, where the offer to purchase document actually says right on it, not a contract, right? So how and when to use each of these forms is what we'll cover today. We will go, as I mentioned on this morning's call, we're going to start with the one that most of you won't use very often, because there are some of you on the call today who know full well how to utilize either the offer to purchase form and or the purchase agreement form, and you're interested in the contract conversation, right? So we're going to start with that contract conversation so that those of you who don't need the other can kind of exit the call and head back to your day while we move into the other two that are more standard for where we are. Does that sound like a good plan in terms of how we're going to structure the day? Does that sound fair to everybody who is here for the contract thing and doesn't want to have to wait 35 minutes to get to it? All righty. I do what I can do to be accommodating. What would be awesome, though, is if more of you would turn on your cameras, because I can only see Jennifer and David and Silva. And as much as I love to look at Jennifer and David and Silva, there's Tanya. Thank you so much. Okay. So, okay, I'm just looking at the chat. DocuSign is the devil. If for those of you who are here for DocuSign is the devil, you're 48 hours, you're 24 hours early. That's tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock. What we're doing right now is a form session, starting with, again, the contract form and then moving into the other forms. So we may lose some people now that I've just made that announcement. We can call it forms of the devil if it would help, if you want to stay. All righty. So let's dive in. I'm going to share my screen with you as I put these forms up on the screen for you. So where do you find this form? This is the standard form real estate contract. Anybody ever use this, and where do you find it?
The MLS?
That's 100% correct, Cindy. You find it in the MLS. And when it says standard form real estate contract, we're not kidding. It is a standard form real estate contract. It is what most of the rest of the state utilizes to write offers. We also call it a fill in the blank contract because when you use this, you are actually filling in the blanks on an actual contract, right? Generally speaking, in Fairfield County, we write it on one form, the purchase agreement or the offer to purchase, and then we send that signed form off to the attorneys, and the attorneys create the contract. I will tell you, attorneys in Fairfield County especially don't love this form. How do I know that? I know that because just last week, I had an agent call me and say, so I'm confused. Are we supposed to write addendums to contract? And I said, well, no, but explain what you mean. He said, well, I have an attorney telling me that I have to write an addendum myself or have you do it to add somebody as a non-occupant borrower into the contract, or a non-borrowing occupant, or it was some version of that. And I said, well, no, just, you must have misunderstood it. Go back and make sure that the buyer knows that their attorney just has to do that. Well, the attorney came back both to the agent and to me and said, no, you provided the contract, therefore you need to provide the addendum. And what she was saying without saying it is, I don't like it when you real estate agents play attorney and use this standard form real estate contract, because that's not how we do things here in Fairfield County. And so because you did that, I'm going to hold my breath and say anything that has to be changed on this contract, I'm not going to do. She was being kind of a jerk. And she ultimately ended up doing it because my pushback was, well, I appreciate the fact that you are asking me to do that. However, what you're asking me to do over and above what I'm licensed to do is practice law, and I'm not licensed to practice law. So we can either leave it undone or you can do it. Your choice. Let me know what you prefer. So she did it. So understand that there's not a whole lot of love for this document in Fairfield County. However, one of the reasons that some of you are here today is to understand kind of how to use it in the current scenario. Why would this document, this actual contract, be useful to buyers or sellers in the current environment?
Because of multiple offers?
Exactly right? Because things are moving so swiftly, and many properties are selling at multiple offers, where if you represent a buyer, you get to have some clarity around the fact that once they sign this, for the most part, and I'm going to tell you some of the pitfalls that this document has as well, once you sign this document, you feel like you've purchased a house, right? With some of our other documents, too many attorneys tell their clients, their seller clients, don't worry, whatever you signed, I can get you out of it. This one, maybe less so, right? So it's some more certainty. It has more teeth, and it feels more like somebody has actually signed a contract and means it versus a document that doesn't necessarily have the legal weight that this does. Why could it be good for sellers?
Possibly just like you said, that it holds more weight.
Yeah, so just like on the buyer side, where the buyers, when the buyers use it, they want the seller to kind of lock into them. Well, there are some sellers who look at this and think, you know what, I don't want to accept one offer and then have them wake up tomorrow morning thinking they're overpaying for the house and they're going to run away, or think they're going to negotiate me down in inspection items or whatnot. So instead of something loosier goosier, let's lock these buyers in with a contract. So it can go either way, right? The parties can feel as though this is a more binding scenario with this document. So here's the quick rundown. The first page is not all that is not all that complicated. And I apologize, I'm just looking for my, who's on the call? All right, so Silva, do me a favor. I'm spotlighting you.
Yes.
Tell everybody a 90-second story.
About what?
Can you tell me what, you can tell us what those pictures are behind you?
Oh,
Going to go do something, so talk.
well, this is Greece. This is my dream board. And I have pictures of Greece because I would like to buy an apartment in Greece next year. So this is my vision board.
Love it.
I thought that you want me to tell you a 90-second story about an attorney and signing contracts.
No, well, it was up to you. I left it completely open to you because I needed to run out and get my actual hard copies of them. So let me reshare my screen.
As a matter of fact, to the subject, I would like to share with you very quickly that I was asked by an agent who works north to write an addendum. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know how to write an addendum because we don't do it here, but can you please send me an example and I will follow. And then he just texted me the whatever sentence I had to put into an addendum and send it to both attorneys. And I said, hey guys, this is what needs to go into contract, period. So there are simple ways of going around this.
Correct. P.S. We actually did ask that attorney before it came to me for an example of what she was looking for, and she refused to give us an example. She, like I said, sometimes people just want to be jerky, and I think she woke up on like the cranky side of the bed that day. So, so here's how this document kind of rolls out. You have your seller and their address. You have their buyer's name, the buyer's name and their address. Nothing terribly difficult about the buyer's name and the seller's name and their addresses. The real property address is the property you're making an offer on, right? So that's what goes in this next line here. And then, of course, any personal property to be included or excluded, right? Any questions on this first little piece? It's pretty simple, right? Pretty self-explanatory. P.S. Hector did ask a question. Do you use this to make offers on bank-owned properties? The answer is yes. Bank-owned properties typically require this, as well as short sales. If you ever made an offer on a short sale, they oftentimes require this document instead of the ones that we use. So great question. The next piece is how the purchase price is broken down. Right. Let me just walk you through the math on this. Payable as follows, right? So the purchase price is payable as follows. A, by initial deposit upon execution of this contract. So line A is whatever money they're putting down as a good faith deposit, right? Typically that's going to be 1% in our world. It doesn't have to be 1%. The law doesn't dictate 1%, and yet reasonable and customary in our world typically is 1%, right? So if you have a $500,000 offer, your line A will be $5,000. And then line B, by additional deposit to be paid on or before. Typically, you're looking at a week or two to bring the additional money to the table, right, for the rest of your down payment. And let's just decide that this is like an 80-10-10 scenario, 80% financing, 10% down, and then 10% additional cash at closing. That's a pretty standard scenario. Can we all agree to just use that as the example? Excellent. So if you have a $500,000 purchase price, line A will be $5,000 because that's 1%. Line B, typically in 7 to 14 days, will be the additional down payment. And oftentimes that's going to be another 9%, right? So in this example, line B would be $45,000. So you've got 5,000 and then 45,000, equaling the total down payment money of 10%. Line C is your mortgage amount. Line C is your mortgage amount. So in this case, an 80% mortgage off of $500,000 would be $400,000, right? So you would write $400,000 in on line C. And then line D, you have the rest of the money you're bringing to the closing table, which means what's left? You've got $400,000 as a mortgage. You've got $50,000 as a down payment broken out into 5 and 45 on lines A and B. What's left to bring cash to the closing table is another $50,000. And all of that on the total purchase price line right here should add up to whatever the offer is. So the math is, you can see it right here, sum of A, B, C, and D. Not hard, you break it all out here, and this is the total offer. Make sense? So there's questions around how the down payment could be broken out. The good news, guys, is that you get to make those determinations with your buyer, right? The buyer gets to make that call. Say it's FHA financing, right, where they have only 3.5% down. 3.5% of $500,000 is what? Like 17.5, right? 17.5. So in that scenario, you'd have a $500,000 total purchase price. You'd have a mortgage of 500 minus 17.5, which is what, 483.5. So in line C, you'd put 483.5. In line D, you'd put 0 because you're not bringing any additional money to the table. And then between lines A and B, you could do 1% on A and the other 2.5% down on B. As long as the numbers make up A and B is the total money down, C is the mortgage, and D is the rest of the money to come to the closing table. Does that make sense to everybody? Again, there's not a hard and fast rule about what the monies are. It's just a matter of how you would break it out. And then, so again, Ryan's question, if it's 10% and 90% mortgage, then you might do 1% on A, 9% on B, and the rest, 90% of the mortgage. So $450,000 on C and then 0 on D. Or maybe they're only putting 5% down up front. So you do 1% on A, 4% on B, 90% of the mortgage, which is C, and then the other 5% at closing. It's a matter of how strong you want the offer to look, and it's a matter of how of when the buyer's money starts to become available. All of those things need to be discussed with the buyer and structured that way. And if it's an all cash deal, you leave the mortgage line blank, right? So if it's 90, if you're putting 10% down and bringing the rest to closing, it'd be 1% on A, 9% on B, 0 on C, and then the rest, $450,000 on D, totaling the purchase price. You seeing how this works? You just kind of play with the numbers. And again, you don't make those decisions. You get to ask the buyers exactly how they're structuring their financing and write it up the way they expect to have it structured. The next piece here is the mortgage contingency, right? So that mortgage amount that you wrote in C up here, gets filled in right here on 6A. The term of the mortgage is typically 30 years, and yet again, you have to ask that question of the loan officer and the buyer to see what they're asking to be contingent upon, and then a written loan commitment to be obtained by a certain date. You need to be in communication with your loan officers to make sure that the date that you're putting there is reasonable. I know that most loan officers are asking for a little more time right now, right? So a 3-week close might be tight if they're obtaining a mortgage. Loan officers are asking more for like a 5 to 6 week period of time, more like a 30 to 45 day period of time, because appraisers and title and everybody's all just kind of backed up, right? Third-party mortgage versus purchase money mortgage. That's a great question, Jody, and I don't know the answer to it. Whenever I use this form, I leave it blank because I don't know the difference. So what we can do, however, is get an answer from our mortgage partners. I'll see if I can get that before the end of the call. Please note, if this mortgage contingency is filled in, paragraph 23 is automatically made a part of the contract. Paragraph 23, just to show you what that reference is the mortgage contingency. Right? And so yeah, purchase money mortgage might be seller financing. Third-party mortgage is kind of what we typically see, right? The other one, I'm just not 100% sure, so I don't want to tell you something that's incorrect. And yet the contingency itself, on a contingency itself, just note that this paragraph gets activated once you fill in something here. And then number 7, the closing date, right? You're choosing a date. My recommendation is on the buyer side to ask the seller, the listing agent, if there's a specific date that the sellers have in mind. And if the buyers don't care, just use that. And so guys, I know there's a whole bunch of questions being asked. I'm gonna cruise through on this form and then answer them at the end, if that's all right. Right? Because I don't want to go into too many different, down too many different bunny trails, because I promised a document class. So the closing date is going to be based on what the buyer would prefer, or a conversation with the seller. And if the buyer doesn't care, just use the seller's date, and you can pop that into that space right there. And then typically you're just writing in the county of the seller's attorney, if you know it. Again, I often just write in Fairfield County, even if it's not Fairfield County. Nobody seems to really get too upset about that. Notice that the buyers and the sellers do have initial lines at the bottom of each of these pages. Number 9 is your inspection contingency. And so you see at the top, it says the inspection shall be completed not later than, and then a date. Right? Generally speaking, in a normal market, you're looking at 7 days. I encourage you to attempt to make that sooner if you're in a multiple offer situation. And today you should just assume that you are. The struggle that we're having with making it sooner is a backlog of inspectors to do the inspections. So I will tell you that one of the things I'm currently advising anyone who will take me up on it is, as the buyer starts to decide that this is the house they want, as you're driving back to the office to sit down and run some comps and do the research with them so that we can write the offer up, call your inspector and schedule the inspection for 2 or 3 days from now. Don't wait until it's all done. Schedule it with the inspector. Be clear with the inspector. Hey, you know what? I expect to have an accepted offer later this afternoon. I'm looking at what's today? Today's Wednesday. I'm looking at Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Can you put me in? No, I have 2 appointments, but I can do Saturday at 3. Great. Pencil me in. By 7 o'clock tonight, I will confirm that. And see if you can't get on somebody's calendar for a shorter time period. If you can, it's a big plus, because now you can say to the listing agent, no, by the way, we already have our inspection scheduled for Saturday at 3 o'clock. Please note, almost any other offer you might take, you and I both know that we're looking at a week out, right? So we're looking to fast track this. So we already have that appointment scheduled. So that's the date you'll put in here. You'll put in a reasonable amount of time, which is typically a week. However, in a multiple offer situation, you may want to work with the buyer to rewind that date a little bit. And then you're just checking the boxes as to which inspections you are going to actually do and which ones you're waiving. I will tell you that just because you say yes doesn't mean you have to do it, but you are reserving the right to do each of these tests. Note that this also says that if you fill the inspection contingency, paragraph 24 is activated, and 24 is just more language about the inspection contingency, right? Number 10 is just the initials indicating that the buyer has received the Connecticut property condition disclosure form and has signed it. Because if they don't receive it, the seller offers a credit of $500 at the closing table. So it's just an initial saying that your buyers have received and signed that document. And then of course 11 is initials indicating that they have received the lead disclosure form and everything that goes along with it. So 10 and 11 are just buyers' initials, recognizing that they've received these reports. This next piece just outlines that the lead-based paint disclosure is a federal law and needs to be acknowledged and abided by. Number 12. If I've not received disclosures, I put NA and initials. Yes, so again, if they haven't received it, then they can't go ahead and sign that, right? 12 just talks about the broom cleanness of the property when it's closed and delivery and acceptance of the deed on the closing date. Again, you don't necessarily have to know every single word and every single line. You're not an attorney. I'm not here to turn you into an attorney. I just want to show you kind of the basic structure of this document so you can utilize it a little bit better. Number 13, right? Unless crossed out, the following paragraphs are hereby made a part of this contract. So that's 16 through 29. 16 through 29 just goes through all the things that are typically included in a contract of sale that's written up by attorneys. It talks about having marketable title. It talks about the condition of the premises. It talks about any damages or risk of loss between now and the closing date. It talks about how the escrow deposit works. It talks about defaults and liquidated damages, adjustments, personal property, and then again we're back to the mortgage and the inspection contingencies. So just note that what number 13 says is all those things are activated unless you cross them out. And there's almost no reason, I'm going to say there is no reason for you without consulting the buyer's attorney to cross some of that stuff out. Don't start hacking apart this contract unless you get legal advice from the buyer's legal representative, right? You don't have, if they want to alter all this across the state, that's fine. I'm asking you not to do that because we don't have the training, we don't have the license to go ahead and start adjusting this language. 14 additional terms. Is anything else? What else is part of the deal that you want to make sure is part of the contract? You write in there, or you put an asterisk and say see addendum, and on a separate piece of paper write out whatever it is you want to make a part of that contract. If there were riders attached, say for short sales or something, you would reference it here. Most of the time that's NA. And again, initials at the bottom of each page. Initials at the bottom of this page. 25 through 29, 25 through 28 are the remaining things that were activated from line 13, unless you took them out, which is a discussion about title insurance, a discussion about resale docs, a discussion about liens, and a binding effect and entire agreement clause, which is standard for all contracts in our state. And then, of course, you have the signature lines and the information lines, right? So the seller's agent, their license number, the firm, and the address, and the seller's attorney all go here, and then the buyer's side people all go here in 29 on each side, so that all that information is made a part of the contract. And then the buyers and the sellers sign here at the bottom. Now, Silva made a point that at the top of each of these pages, there's a date and a property known as. If you fill this in on the forms filler on the MLS, that will automatically fill in and be fed with the date that you're doing it and from line 3, real property address. So if you type in 123 Main Street here, it auto-populates all of these on each at the top of each page, and it fills in the date for you, right? If you're doing it by hand for some reason, you do have to fill in the top of each of these pages with a date and the property address you're making an offer on. Let me bring one thing to your attention because it's an important part of this contract. Let me just find it. Here we go. So at the bottom of page number 1, this is the last thing I want to say on this before you ask me some questions about this, this contract. Number 8, which I skipped over, is the attorney review period. Because you're not attorneys, this is designed so that an actual attorney gets an opportunity to look at it before the client is actually bound. So you'll see that this says, this contract is subject to review by the attorneys for both the buyer and the seller. Based upon their review, either party may cancel the contract by written notice to the other party not later than 5 business days after they receive a fully executed version of this contract. And upon cancellation, the deposit is returned. So the out that people have with this document is the attorney review period. Because within 5 business days of the parties signing this document, either party, upon their attorney's review, can say, yeah, I don't think so, I'm out. So one of the things that I know some agents have been doing in multiple offer scenarios to tighten this up a little bit is that they've been speaking to the buyer's attorney to say, look, we're going to need you to be available because what we're amending in this contract that we're writing is the attorney review period. We're amending it to say 48 hours, right? You have 2 business days, not 5. And as long as the buyers and the buyer's attorney are on board with that, knowing that after 2 business days, you're stuck with what you've signed, then we move forward, right? So it's just one more way to tighten it up. But do recognize that number 8 does exist in this contract, and it does, unedited, give 5 business days for each party to have their attorney review it and cancel it with no penalty on either party if they don't like it. They don't have to give you a reason. It's just their attorney's review, and then if somebody decides to change their mind, they're out. Make sense? Any questions, comments, or concerns about this 4-page long form document that you don't use very often? I know we spent a half hour on a document that you won't use very often, but again, more and more of you are using it in the current environment than ever before. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that. So you tighten it by changing the attorney review period from 5 days to 4 or 3 or 2. But you need to have a conversation with the buyer that you're doing that. You need to have a conversation with the buyer's attorney to make sure they're both on board so that when the seller signs this, accepts the offer and signs it, they're going to jump into action to make sure that the attorney has an opportunity to review it and come back to the buyer and say, I think you should cancel this contract because of X, Y, or Z, or we need to amend it before that period, right?
Rick, did you say that this is used in most of the state?
It's used in all of the state except for Fairfield County. We use it very, very sparingly here for whatever reason. I guess we're special, right? Except for bank-owned REOs and short sales and the occasional opportunity in multiple offer situations.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca asks, is there a period written into the contract for the buyer to back out because of inspections? Yeah, so that's at the top of page 2, Rebecca. Top of page 2 is your inspection contingency. And it is separate from the attorney review period, yes. They're 2 separate contingencies. This contract has a mortgage contingency if activated, an inspection contingency if activated, and then an attorney review period unless you alter that. Is it legal to use this 4-page contract in Fairfield County? Yes, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And again, it could be worth your time in multiple offers scenarios, right? Now you may have listing agents who you present this to who say, we don't use that here, sorry, give it to me on a form that I recognize. And as long as that's coming from the seller, there's nothing you can do about that. The seller has a right to have the offers written on whatever document they choose. How will you know that it's coming from the seller and not the listing agent? You won't. And so here's my thought. If you're asked to rewrite something on a different form, maybe ask some questions. I'm curious, is there a reason that this form is not acceptable? And if they still push it, then just rewrite it. Because by not rewriting it on the form that they're asking for, you're putting the buyers in jeopardy without even realizing it, right? Don't try to win that battle. It's not worth losing the war. Make sense? Any questions, comments, concerns on this 4-page standard real estate contract form, which is found in the MLS?
Yeah, Rick, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I have a sale sold as is and no contingencies other than the deed is good. It can be title can be transferable.
Yes.
So when I'm filling out this form, I just have to ignore those contingencies.
So maybe the answer is you're not using this form. Maybe you're just using a standard purchase agreement, right, for that. However, if you did want to use this form because it's multiple offers or it's bank owned or whatever, right, what I would do is work with the buyer and the buyer's attorney to say to the buyer's attorney, look, we need your assistance with this contract. You fill out everything you can fill out and then have the attorney give you the thumbs up. Hold on, I lost you. Where are you, Hector? Hold on. There you are. Okay.
I'm here.
Yeah, no, you stayed in the same spot. You just moved around on my screen, so I couldn't find you. I would have the buyer's attorney, when you say to them, okay, so here's the thing. It's not contingent upon anything but this. It's as is. Which paragraphs are important for the buyer to leave in, and which paragraphs, based on what I just told you, Mr. or Mrs. Attorney, for the buyer, which should we take out? I would encourage you to have the buyer's attorney give advice about amending, certainly that substantially, this contract. Because for all intents and purposes, once both parties sign this, I use this whenever I'm buying property in Waterbury, Naugatuck. I just used it again when I bought a property in New London. My attorney doesn't rewrite anything. The seller's attorney doesn't send over a contract. This is it. This now is the contract, right? So you need to be cautious that what you're presenting, you mean, and you're not leaving anything out. So before I would start hacking away at some of these paragraphs, I would get guidance from the attorney. Now, if it's just contingencies, it's a cash deal, so you don't have to activate number 6, the mortgage contingency, and you're waiving all inspections. Well, those you can just leave blank or put NA, and then those contingencies evaporate, right? If you're talking about more than mortgage and more than inspection contingencies, or more than getting clarity around maybe tightening up the attorney review period, I believe the right path forward for the buyer client is to involve their attorney in that. I wouldn't want to start hacking away at paragraph 16 about marketable title, because frankly, I don't know enough about what this says from a legal perspective to either give my advice that it should stay in or give my advice that it should stay out. And because I'm not an attorney, I'm going to step back and allow the attorney to do the job that they went to school for.
Rick,
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Sure thing, Hector.
Um,
Cindy.
I ran into a little bit of trouble when I used this form one time, going back to the building inspection issues that you're going to either do or waive.
Uh-huh.
Came to the title search, and maybe because I wasn't that familiar with it, I marked it yes because I knew that the attorney is going to do a title search.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize was that it said, probably didn't read it, 10 business days after the inspection completion date.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the attorneys don't do that title search till a little bit further down the road in the process.
Yeah. Great point.
I had marked it yes, and then I got a call on the 10th day after the inspections wanting to know where the title search was. And I just wanted to find out from you, should we mark yes and then put a note somewhere that the attorney will handle it? How would you do that?
Yes, that's a really great point, Cindy. In this scenario, I think I would mark yes, and either right next to title search, put a different date, like a date that's a week prior to the closing or something, or underneath the written on number 9, it says the title search completion date shall be no later than blank business days after inspection completion date. Maybe you make that 45, or you build something different in, knowing that here, right, again, these are written for the state, and so sometimes it's done differently in different areas. Here, most attorneys are waiting till much closer to you're 100% right about that, waiting closer to the end of the time period. So
Well,
you may
because
want to
they pay-
alter that.
Yeah, they pay a lot of money for it, and then they don't want to do that until they know you're going to get the mortgage in many cases.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that. And so I do know that Rebecca's on the call. Rebecca, would you just unmute real quick? Would you mind? If the boys are there, I don't care.
Yeah, I apologize for what you hear in the background.
Yeah, no worries. And so I'm just curious, as our resident attorney, because I think you're the only attorney on our call today, do you agree with the advice that I am giving regarding altering any other part of this document?
Wholeheartedly, don't touch it.
Yeah.
I would consult your attorney, your client's attorney from day one, saying you're going to give this form. Do they have anything they like to add from the start? Anything they want to change from the start, or any concerns, and do that from the beginning, and then don't touch it. If the sellers have a question or their attorney has a question, I would loop them straight to your attorney and try to kind of push that burden onto someone else is the best way to say it. Like, take yourself out of that position as the attorney and use your client's attorneys because you have them.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure I saw you were on, so I wanted to bring you in to concur on that, because I feel really strongly about that. You're not attorneys, guys, right? Except Rebecca, who is. But if your name isn't Rebecca on this call.
I will say one thing. I am an attorney, and that's what I personally do. I'm not being paid as the attorney. I go to the proper real estate attorney for the deal and push them to do their job. Excellent point.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, guys, any other questions on this form per se? Because I'm gonna in the remaining 15 or 20 minutes or so, I want to just run through the other two forms. They're very, very similar and way shorter. Let's see, we have something. Is bank appraisal necessary? Do you mean, Ginger, as like a contingency? Okay, and so if the buyers decided to have a bank appraisal as a contingency, you would put that here in number 14, additional terms, right? So you would just kind of type right in here, contract contingent upon appraisal coming at or above contracted sale price, or something like that. You would use line 14 for any of those kinds of add-ons that you might be using. Great question. All righty. So that's the one you won't use very often. The ones you will use are these two, right? And so I'm going to go to the purchase agreement next, and then end with the offer to purchase. So we're going from longest and most complicated to least complicated as we move forward. So the purchase agreement looks like this. It's a 2-page purchase agreement. Again, this comes from the MLS. I think it's also inside of your DocuSign and Command. And the whole first piece of this is exactly the same. It just looks a little different as the first part of the 4-page standard contract. You have the date, you have an agreement between the seller's name goes here and their address, who agree to sell, and then the buyer's name and their address, who agree to buy, the property known and described as, and you put the address of the property here, and then you have inclusions and exclusions, right? So it's date, seller address, buyer address, the real property they're purchasing, and any inclusions and any exclusions. You can certainly say, including the following extra items as per MLS number 170244772, right? You can certainly say that, and or list other things. I kind of like to say as per MLS number and then put the number in, and then any of the big stuff that's listed on the MLS number, like the appliances, or if there's outbuildings or equipment for things like pools or central vacuuming systems. I like to list those separately as well, just so everyone is clear, right? So it's what you listed in the MLS and all these other things, even if they are listed in the MLS, I want them listed separately. And then of course, anything that you are looking to exclude would go here. Moving through, you have then the math portion of this one, which again is very similar and yet not the same. In this document, hold on, we have a question in the chat. Can you use the inclusion exclusion addendum? Absolutely, D, you can. And if you're utilizing this form and you have an inclusion exclusion addendum from the seller, you could simply say as per inclusion exclusion addendum in each of these lines, right? I might list that as well, as per list number 1702 blah, 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 as well as inclusion exclusion addendum and extra refrigerator in basement or whatever. So the math portion here, the offer price is at the top instead of the bottom. So you kind of start with the $500,000 here. The 1% is the second line here, right? Cash as a binder. So typically that's your 1%. And it's held in escrow by either, right now you're still saying Keller Williams Realty. By the end of the year, you will write in the buyer's attorney's trustee account, because we're going to be shifting away from accepting escrow accounts by the end, escrow deposits by the end of the year, and that'll rest with your buyer's attorney. But for now, it will still say Keller Williams Realty, and that's the 1% that goes in the second line. And then the third line is the extra down payment, right? Cash on signing a superseding contract. Remember, this document assumes it's a contract, but it also assumes that it's going to be replaced by an attorney contract. And we'll get to that language on the second page in a minute. And Donna asks whether it's okay if we're already passing escrow checks to buyers' attorneys. Absolutely. If you've already made that change or you're making that change with your buyer clients, I'm all for it. We're just going. We haven't announced yet the official change of that. We'll announce it in the next month or so, and we'll have the fall to kind of make the transition. And by the first of the year, at the latest, we will go entirely to that new system. The fourth line here, cash on taking title to premises. So that's the money you're bringing to the closing table. So if this is 1% and this is 9%, and this last one, which is the mortgage, happens to be 80%, well, then you're bringing additional 10% to the closing table. And that's number 4 here, cash on taking title to the premises, because you take title at the closing, and it's asking you right here when that closing date is going to be. That's the one little change in this form. There's not a separate line someplace else for closing date. It's built into the money portion. Make sense? And then, of course, you have line number 5 here, which is the money of being paid by the mortgage, which it states right here. You'll check whether it is or is not, right? Is or is not. And frankly, I would have the buyers initial that, so it's not a check mark or an X. Have the buyers, if there is a contingency, have them initial here. If it's not contingent on the mortgage, then have them initial here. That way, no one can ever come back to you and say, you made a mistake. You checked not contingent, and I absolutely said it was contingent upon that. So I wouldn't, if it were me, I wouldn't put my handwriting in those two boxes. I would leave that for the buyers to initial one or the other as to whether or not it's contingent or not. It just keeps you safer. And then, of course, this financing date is your mortgage commitment date. Have a conversation with your loan officer about what that should be, and pop that in there. And then, of course, at the prevailing rate for a 30-year mortgage or a 20-year or a 15-year, whatever. This is the mortgage year amount. You can see number of years is underneath that. And then this line down here at the very bottom, it says contingencies. This is where any other contingencies go, right? Any other contingencies go. Okay, so this comes directly from the MLS, which does not have little boxes to check for your inspections. The one that we typically use inside of your command and in DocuSign does have underneath this contingencies line boxes for your inspections. Where's Silva? Am I making that up?
All right.
No, it is the first time I see something like this.
Yeah, so my apologies. I just asked for blanks to be sent from the MLS so I could use them, and that piece is somehow missing. Donna, what's the issue?
So I just got one of these, and it was from a New York agent who's also licensed in Connecticut, and she did pull this off of the Smart MLS. She just wrote in the inspections, just like we normally do. Instead of checking a box, she just wrote it in.
Yeah, so if this is the form you're using, you would write in any other contingencies here, including any inspections that you're going to do with a date, and what Ginger brought up before. If you have a bank appraisal contingency, that would all be written in here. I'm sorry, I don't have the one from Command that we normally see. Just know that it underneath this, either right above it or right underneath it, it has boxes like the standard contract, and you would just check the boxes the way we showed you in the last time. So my apologies for that.
The contingency after that, there is a date.
Correct.
Yeah, how to fill in the date that I had a problem with the date.
Yeah, so
when
again,
you fill in home inspection, mortgage contingency date, mortgage contingency, the date you fill in by the inspection or by the mortgage contingency.
So if it were me, this says contingencies, and then it just has one line for the date. I would write in, if I was writing stuff in, I would write in inspection contingencies, including the following inspections by this date, period. Bank appraisal contingency by this date. So just be clear with each date and how it connects to each of the contingencies.
Oh, okay. So put the date, each date different after the contingency. So there are different dates.
They certainly could be, and oftentimes they are. And so that way it's clear. The thing you want to always be certain about is that anyone who's not you or not the buyer who's reading this understands what they're agreeing to, right? So sometimes when we know it in our head, we write something and it's like, somebody else reads it and thinks, I don't understand that. So make sure that it's written very clearly. And I would say overkill is better than underkill. So if you're putting a date next to each contingency, then it's very clear.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then this second page on this two-pager, the purchase agreement, you have the similar things as what we saw in the 4-page contract. The buyer is going to check a box here or here. Again, for me, I would have the buyer initial over the boxes. I'm just big on me not checking things and having people initial over things so we know who did it, right? So the buyer's going to initial that they've either received it or not received. This is the Connecticut Property Condition Disclosure Form. And then, of course, it has this little blurb about how the property will be conveyed via warranty deed and marketable title. And then the contract of sale, weird little spot for this to be, but so don't miss it. The contract of sale to be signed on or before a date here. Typically, in a normal moving market, you're looking at anywhere from 7 to 14 calendar days for that, because it oftentimes takes attorneys a week or 10 days to get that written, get it sent to the other attorney to review it, make comments on it, attach a rider, and they go back and forth on stuff like that. In a faster moving market, with conversation with your buyer and perhaps the buyer's attorney, you may look to tighten that up a little bit, right? But generally speaking, it's anywhere from 7 to 14 calendar days, so you can count out the days and pop that date in here. Notice that this document says this agreement to remain in full force and effect and constitute a valid contract between the parties unless or until it's superseded by a contract written by the attorneys, right? So this has this little extra tooth in there that says, once you sign this, this is a contract with all these contingencies that you've written in, but it is a contract until or unless a new contract becomes available by your attorneys, right? So it has just a little bit more teeth in it. Make sure that on the listing side, if you receive one of these, that the sellers understand that. Make sure that if you're on the listing side and the seller accepts an offer on one of these forms, and then a day later a higher offer comes in and they say to you, well, what can I do? Please don't say things like, well, you just signed a binder, you can do whatever you want. Because this document says something different. And most attorneys for sellers will say to the seller, don't worry, I can get you out of it. It's just been my experience, right? And yet you don't want to make that decision or give that advice to your seller client and have them go and accept something else, and then all of a sudden they're in hot water with the first people. That information has to come from the seller's attorney after you send it and say, here's what we signed. Please tell us what we can do. We have to get back to this potential other offer that we want to accept. Again, you may see a theme here, and the theme is when it comes to something contractual, please don't play attorney and please don't try and be helpful. Be helpful by sending them to their legal representative, their legal counsel, because that's what that person is there for, right? Have them make the decisions about what is and is not contractual and what is or is not a contractual obligation, and not have that be you. I would ask Rebecca to concur again, but I know she is way on board with that. So the seller and buyer further agree to be bound, la-di-da-di-da, and then everybody signs, right? The sellers sign here, the buyers sign here, and then you list the agents here and the attorneys here, and then stick that little acceptance date in there once we have the date of acceptance, although everyone's signing with a date anyway, so that's pretty much considered the acceptance date. Questions, comments, concerns about this document, which again, for those of you working in lower Fairfield County, is more often the norm for you than any of the other two.
Hey, Rick, at the end of the contract there, where the contract to be signed by, you said 7 to 14 days. Are those business days or just 7 to 14 days? So it's calendar days here. Notice that this is looking for a date. So you can make it be whatever it is you choose. However, I would look at, generally speaking, in a typical market, anywhere from 7 days to get your inspections done, and then up to 14 days to have contracts signed, simply because we have to give people the time it takes to get things done. When things are moving far more quickly, you may want to tighten that up, but I wouldn't tighten it up until or unless you've had conversation with the buyers and their attorney to make sure that everyone's on board with tightening things up a little bit. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, last thing, guys, and we'll do this in the remaining minutes. This is the offer to purchase form. For those of you who live and work in northern Fairfield County, and that's anywhere from kind of mid-Wilton north, right? If you kind of take a line mid-Wilton, South Wilton sometimes does the Southern Fairfield County thing, where mid to North Wilton typically is more along the lines of what's happening in kind of the greater Danbury into Newtowny area, right? So Northern Fairfield County, as defined as I just indicated, typically uses this document. And it's a far simpler document. It's a one-pager. I'll run through it real quick with you. Buyer offers to purchase from seller the property located at blank, right? So there, it's a simplified version of what we've already seen, the buyer's name and then the seller's name and then the property address that they're making the offer on in those first 3 lines. The MLS number, there is a spot for that as listed in the SMART MLS, right? The SMART Multiple Listing Service. So you put in the MLS number as it reads on the MLS sheet, and then as listed in the SMART Multiple Listing Service, because that's pretty much where you're getting this information nowadays. And then, of course, the date of the offer. And then you have a line there for any inclusions. As Dee mentioned before, oftentimes you'll have maybe an inclusion-exclusion addendum that's provided by the listing agent. So you could certainly say, as per listing number 1704, whatever, as well as the inclusion-exclusion addendum. Or you could just list any inclusions here. I've also used this for exclusions, right? If the inclusions are as per the MLS and you want to make sure that the rusted out, beat up old Volkswagen that doesn't have license plates that's sitting in the garage is out, you can write that in here as well. And then it outlines terms and conditions here in the middle. You see the same 5 lines to break out the math. This is done almost the exact same way as the purchase agreement. The first line is this. See where it says sale price colon? I think they always should have little dotted lines that go across here to make sure you understand where the lines go. But sale price, so the offer price, goes in the first line on this form. The initial deposit is going to be submitted to and acknowledged by Keller Williams Realty until or unless we change it. And so this second line is the 1%, just like it was on the purchase agreement. The third line, balance of deposit, is the additional down payment. So another say 9%, just to keep the example the same. So you've got the purchase price up here at $500,000. You've got 1% here of $5,000, and then an additional 9% because they're putting 10% down on the contract, right? So a total of 10% goes in the second and third lines here, broken out 1 and 9. And then the mortgage contingency shows up. So payable by a mortgage is a sum of blank. So line 4 is your mortgage amount. So in the example we used before, that was 80% or $400,000 goes here. At an interest rate of blank for a term of blank. So you're just simply going to put in, you can put in PREV for prevailing rates. Or if the buyer wants to make a contingent upon themselves getting a specific rate, maybe your buyer doesn't want to buy this property for this much money if they have to pay more than 3% or more than 4%. So they could always write in a number here if they wanted to make it contingent upon the percentage. For me, it was always just PREV, which is prevailing rates for a term of 20, 30, 15 years, whatever it is, right? So that line 4 is your mortgage loan amount. And then line 5 right here is the remaining balance, so cash to bring to the closing table. So in this case, you have a $500,000 offer on line 1, payable by $5,000, and then another 9%, which is $45,000, with a mortgage of $400,000 on line 4, which leaves $50,000 to bring cash to the closing table. So it's the exact same structure as the purchase agreement, and that's how that works. Squeezed in between that math, those math lines and the inspection piece are a mortgage contingency date, which you'll put in here. Again, speak to the loan officers involved and make sure that you're putting in something that is reasonable. And then if you have one more little blank in here, if in fact you're going to make the offer expire at a specific time, right? One of the tools you have available to you in multiple offers. I just did this with my New London purchase. We wrote an offer for over asking before we had seen it. And we said, the guy said, well, we don't have any other offers right now. This was on a Monday night. He said, but I am expecting other offers, certainly by tomorrow or the next day, because I've got a lot of interest. Great. So we wrote an offer that said this offer will expire at noon on Tuesday. We submitted it like 8 o'clock on Monday night. They had until noon on Tuesday to accept our offer. And if not, we were taking it off the table because we didn't want it to just sit around and be utilized to help other people pay more. We wanted either a yes or a no. We were willing to walk away if, in fact, they weren't willing to give us a good answer. So that's what this is used for here. In a normalized market, I always used to not use this. I used to just put NA in there except for special circumstances. When you're battling for properties the way we are today, have a discussion with the buyer about perhaps setting a time period, right? And then you have the whole inspection piece here. Again, this blank here says inspections are going to be done within how many calendar days. For me, that's typically 7. Again, you may want to move that up because things are moving so quickly, and if you can pre-book an inspection, even better. And then you'll just click off the inspections that you're going to be reserving the right to do. And then in this second paragraph here in the inspection contingency discussion, there's another blank here. And what that is you're giving a number of days once you receive all of the information back. Within a certain number of days, you're going to have a conversation with the seller if there are any issues. For me, I like to put 3 in there, right? You can certainly do 2, you can certainly do 5. Generally speaking, once you get all the inspection reports back, though, you're kind of getting back to the seller within 24 to 48 hours. So 3 is more than enough time. It just simply notes the property condition disclosure and lead. There's no statement to be made there, or no acknowledgement, no initialing or anything. It just makes a statement there. Again, this is not a contract, right, where it says right here. So we don't have to actually have initials on those things. This is not a contract of sale. A formal contract will be agreed upon by all parties and executed within 14 calendar days after the acceptance of all terms, right? So I like 14 in there in a normal scenario. Again, with things moving so quickly, you may want to tighten that up, but just have conversation with the buyer and the buyer's attorney before making that determination. Closing of sale to be on or before blank. So you'll put the closing date in here in conjunction with the loan officer and the buyers and the sellers with where you're getting that information. So the closing date is here. And then the last piece on this form that doesn't show up on the other forms is the parties represent that blank and blank are the real estate brokers representing the buyer and the seller. So if that is if you're using this form and you and somebody at Caldwell Banker are the buyer's agent and the listing agent, you'll write in here Keller Williams Realty and Caldwell Banker Real Estate, right? It's the brokerage firms that are listed here, not your name personally, right? Because it states brokers. So you're looking for the brokerages. So it's Keller Williams Realty or Keller Williams Prestige Properties, depending on your market center, and whoever the other side is. And then you have attachments here. If you have other things that you've received from the listing agent, like the property condition disclosure form, the lead disclosure form, if it's dual agency, if it's in-house, you check that. So just check the boxes that are applicable so that people know what else to look for. And then right down here at the bottom, you have an other contingencies line, like exists in the contract and in the purchase agreement for anything else, right? Whatever else you haven't gotten to. If you ran out of room on top with exclusions, you could always have it be a contingency on excluding the whatever, right? Make sure that happens. I always write in, because I buy investment properties, I always write in as contingencies that the attic and basement and garages will be cleared of all personal belongings that don't currently belong to the current tenants. Because a lot of properties I buy, those spaces are just like catch-alls for tenant after tenant after tenant for year after year after year, just dump stuff there, and I don't want to have to pay for moving it, right? So you can always come up with, whatever else you might have to, the appraisal contingency, as Ginger brought up, might go here, or other things. And then the buyers sign here, the sellers sign here, the agents sign at the bottom, including their office and MLS IDs, and that's the whole form. So it's a shortened version. Please note it does say this is not a contract of sale, so there is really not a lot of teeth on this. And this form, again, in the Ridgefield Market Center, this form shows up as part of your command documents and inside of DocuSign. And if for some reason you can't find it, just email to your MCA or the front desk, and they can send you a PDF of it. But it is inside of your command and DocuSign. If you're in the Stamford Market Center, this form does not show up, I don't believe, inside of command and DocuSign, simply because you guys don't really use it all that much down south. And so what's reasonable and customary for you is the purchase agreement. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Look at that, 2:12, just shy of 75 minutes. That's got to be a new record to do all these. Any questions, comments, or concerns that you have around any of these documents?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear on the last one. If there was this same paragraph that it is subject to attorney review.
It is not. The only paragraph, the only document that has an attorney review clause is the standard 4-page real estate contract. Right? The other two do not have that as written in, that language written in.
I cannot imagine why would I need to use this, as a matter of fact.
Use which? The offer to purchase?
Yeah, the last one, for example, or any other. I mean, so far I've been using just the one that the office provides, and the MLS standard.
Yeah, so you may be asked to use it, and part of the reason I'm doing all of them today is with more of you traveling more places, right? And so if Silva decides to start showing property in Bethel and sells a house in Bethel, she may write it up on what's normal and customary to her, and what she may get back from the listing agent is, we don't use this form, and the seller would like it on a regular offer to purchase form. So if we could use the standard offer to purchase form that we typically use here, and now because Silva has kind of gone through seeing what that looks like, she knows it exists, she knows it's not the devil, she knows how to fill it out, right? Because as I said before, fighting with listing agents over a document, I think you're shooting yourself and your buyer in the foot, right? You can certainly ask some questions around why this might not work, but at the end of the day, I would just rewrite it on the form that they're looking for, and get the offer in.
And I'm sorry, where do we get it from?
And so if you're in the Stamford Market Center, I'll provide it inside of Command as well as an add-on for Northern Fairfield County. Just like if you're in the Ridgefield Market Center, we'll add in the purchase agreement that the Stamford Market Center uses into Command. I don't believe they exist right now because we don't want it to be confusing, but it's like an extra folder, we can put that in there. In the meantime, if you need it, just call one of the other offices and say, hey, could you send me this form? Anything else in our remaining minute? Yes, Alicia.
Is there another version that they use in Greenwich?
So Greenwich is a world all unto its own, right? Sometimes you'll see a Greenwich MLS offer form. Sometimes you'll see Greenwich using some of the forms that we use in the rest of Fairfield County. And sometimes you'll see Greenwich be more like New York, where they don't really use a standard form at all. They simply provide a letter of intent. A letter of intent just kind of looks like a letter that outlines a lot of the terms. And so it's not necessarily a form, it's just on somebody's letterhead. You'll see all of those things in Greenwich. So yes, they may use their own form, they may use ours, and they may go the New York route. If you're writing business in New York, generally speaking, the letter of intent is used more than almost anything else. Anything else? All right, guys, that seems like a wrap. I'll see some of you at 4 o'clock for Ignite. You're more than welcome. I hope this was helpful. I will see you all soon. If I don't see you Ignite, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.